Hi, this is Simon Obstall and welcome to another tutorial for Apple Motion. And today we're going to be taking a look at a project that I've looked at before, but this has got some interesting variations. So I hope you're going to like it. So let's begin. Okay, so first of all, project setup, 1920 1080, 24 frames a second, duration of 15 seconds. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come to the library generators, bring in a color solid. And we don't want blue, we want it to be black. So then what we're going to do is we're going to make a new group and we're going to come over to our assets and we're going to import the thing called Smoke Mauve and also the thing called Dirty Glass JPEG. Bring those two in. And the order is important. So the dirty glass wants to be above the smoke. So the first thing I'm going to do, instead of masking this group, I'm actually going to turn it to fixed resolution. And I'm going to set it to 600 by 600. And you can see that's effectively created a mask for the elements within that group. I'm going to come to the smoke and open up the scale, and I want to set its X scale to 75%. The reason for that is I kind of want it to kind of be more sort of vertical like this. Now this smoke element actually is in your motion library, but I'm not entirely sure whether it's necessarily going to be there depending on whether you've downloaded the bonus content or not. So I'm going to put a link to it anyway. So that's the smoke. So then we're also going to add a couple of filters to this smoke layer. So I'm just turning off that dirty glass for the time being so we can see what we're doing. And first of all, I'm going to add levels. And on top of that, I'm going to add color channel mixer. So let's look at the levels first. Let's hide the channel mixer. So I want to bring this white out value down to around 50% like that. And the black in, I want to crush in like that, not very much at all. And then what I'm going to do is with the channel mixer, I'm going to come down to the alpha section here. And the alpha red, green and blue, I'm going to set each one to 1. And the alpha alpha, I'm going to set to 0.3. And what this is going to do is make it sort of semi-transparent. If we actually look at the alpha channel and turn off that black background there, you can see that in using the luminance as the alpha, if I turn the alpha alpha to nothing, you can see that we've basically got transparency for everything. I just want a little bit of that kind of fog factor, so I've gone for an alpha alpha value of 0.3. So let's turn back on our color view. And now let's re-enable our dirty glass. And here we're just going to set its opacity down to 2%. So it's there, but it's kind of quite subtle. So you can see that's just kind of adding a little bit of sort of texture. So I've renamed that group as composite. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a clone of it. So right click, make clone layer. And let's shut that group down and the background group as well. And let's turn off the composite group. So the important next step with this group is to turn it to 3D like so. And then what we're going to do is we're going to import the other asset, the one called panel USDZ. Bring that in. Now this is an element that I've made in Blender, and I'll explain a little bit about it as we go through. So the first thing I want to do here is to come over and set its opacity down to 8%. And then I want to increase its scale to 118. So now it's fitting with that box that we've made of the composite. And the other thing I need to do is come into the rotation and set the Y rotation to 180. And I think you can just start to see now how this might actually start to work. So if I rotate that group, you can actually see we've got this frame effect from this 3D element that I've created. So I'm going to just rotate that so you can see what I'm doing here. Now, I don't want the actual image panel to be sort of in the middle of the box. I want it to be at the back of it. And I'm going to take the clone layer and I'm going to come to position and set its Z position to -15. And I think you can hopefully now just see, if I undo that, you can see that it's moved the image layer to the back of that box. So let's rotate that group around and you can see what I mean. So there on the back of the box is the image. There's the side of the box, which is sort of transparent, and there's the front. So I'm going to reset that rotation on that group. So then I want to add in our text. So I'm going to select the text tool and I'm going to type the word smoke. I'm going to go for 150. I mean, it's going to depend on your font, how these values are going to work. I'm going to set the baseline to -50, and then you'll see that when I center it up, it's centered in the screen, vertically in the screen. I'm going to come back to the text, and what we also want to do is want to move it over on X. So let's move it over like that. So in this case, it's about -250, and I'm also going to move it up on Y. In this case, with this font, +220. And I'm going to select the text and I'm just going to adjust its color here. And with the grayscale selected, I'm going to go for 30% gray. And the only other thing I need to do is I need to move it back just as we did with the image panel. So come to properties, and that Z value, I'm going to set to -15. So now we're in a position to animate the group, but I think what I'll first of all do is to add a light. So add object light, and I'm going to set its intensity to 750 and increase its fall off to 5 and come over and set its position. Its Y position I want to be 300 and its Z position I want to be 250. So that's just helping us illuminate the scene just as a basic starting point. We'll be adding more lights later on because that's what really makes it nice and fancy. So then, as I say, we're going to animate the group. So first of all, I'm going to come to 2 seconds on the timeline. And what I want to do is I want to, let's close up some of these other panels. I'm just going to set a keyframe for the Y position. And then I'm going to come to the start frame and I'm going to set that Y position to 960. And so now it's going to come down like that. And then I want to come to 7 seconds on the timeline. And I want to keyframe the Z position. And I also want to keyframe the opacity. So keyframes on both of those. Step forward to 9 seconds. And what I'm going to do is set that Z position to -1500 and the opacity down to 0. So at that point, it's going to drift back and fade off. So that's most of the complicated stuff done, and now all we need to do is kind of assemble the layers. So first of all, we're going to duplicate this group. So right-click Duplicate. I'm going to come to 1 second on the timeline, and then there are various different ways in which we can do this. I would use the keyboard shortcut, but I would suggest you come to Mark, Move Selected In Point, and what that does is it delays the start of that group. So then we can step into the group, and we obviously need to change the text. So I'm going to type gets and come over to the position. I'm going to have a Y value of 110 just to move it down like that. The actual group itself, we want to adjust its Z position. Now to do that, I'm just going to use the anchor point. So I'm going to enter a value of -30 for the Z anchor point. And actually, I'm just going to add a camera now so we can see this a little bit more easily. I'm going to switch the angle of view to 50, just so you can understand what I'm doing here. I'm going to just rotate it so you can see. And now you can see we've got those 2 layers, and the gets layer is in front of the smoke layer. And so together they look like this. So then we just need to carry on, duplicate that group. And then for the group here, we need to increase that Z value, that Z anchor point value to -60, so it comes out further. We need to edit the text, so in. We need to adjust its position, so 0 in this case on Y. And for the group itself, we just need to adjust its start time. So I'm going to come to 2 seconds on the timeline. And again, we're going to come to Mark, Move Selected In Point, and those. assemble like that. I'm just going to leave that camera rotated so it's more obvious how this is working. And there you go. Look, you can see now how there's assembling nicely. So then we need to do that same process twice more. So right-click, duplicate the group. Let's add another, or rather subtract another 30 from that Z anchor point to move it further towards us. Let's come to the text. Let's, in this case, set the Y position to -110. Come over, change the text to your, and we need to select the group. And instead of starting at 2 seconds, this one needs to start at 3 seconds. So come to 3 seconds and mark, move selected in point. And we just need to do this one more time. So right click on the group, come to properties, again, subtract another 30 from that Z value, so -120. Come into the text. Let's set that Y position to -220. Come in, edit the text, so it gets in your eyes. And the only other thing we need to do is to move the start position of the group. So instead of 3 seconds, we need 4 seconds. And then mark, move selected in point. And now we've got the main animation all completed. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to animate this camera. So I'm going to zero out that Y rotation. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add behaviors camera sweep. And I'm going to have a start value of -60 and an end value of +80. And you'll see that that sort of allows us to kind of see around the other side. So we're looking at this side to start off with, and then the other side. So we get the maximum benefit of that nice 3D. And now all that remains is to add some more lighting to this. So I'm going to take the light that we've already made and I'm going to duplicate it. This one, I want to move its Y position to -300. So the other one was illuminating the top of the frame. I want this just to kind of fill in at the bottom, but I don't want the same intensity, and I'm going to reduce it down to 250, just so it's not all blasting away at the same level. And then I'm going to duplicate this light, right-click, duplicate. I'm going to set the intensity up to 2500, nice and bright, but the fall-off I'm going to increase to 20%. So then what I want to do is I want to position it, so the X position is going to be -400, and the Y position is going to be 300, and for the Z I want 0. And hopefully you'll now see that this light is lighting up this edge of the box during the opening part of the animation. And we want, obviously, when we come around to the other side, we want a similar effect. So what we can do is just duplicate this same light and just move it. So instead of -400 on X, we want it +400 on X, so it moves over to the other side. And instead of being at the top on Y, we want it to be at the bottom, so -300. And so that nicely balances out that light at the top at the beginning, and then we have a light at the bottom for the back end of the animation. And there you go, that is the project completed. It's quite simple, but I'm sure you'll appreciate that with that 3D box, we've really been able to maximize the effect of this lighting and the sense that these are actually sort of solid panels, which I think is a nice thing to have been able to do. So thanks very much indeed for watching, and see you again another time.